So what did you learn about simping then?
Well, that it doesn't work. That it's if one wants to engage with women and get into a meaningful relationship, simping is not the way forward.
Good afternoon, fellas, and welcome back to Authentic Alphas. This is your boy Ayindei. Today, I'm going to be going over a video made by our content creator, Chris Williamson, and he had a very intelligent guest on, Vincent Harnum. So today, we're going to discuss three main things about simps. Basically, what is simping, why it doesn't work, and most importantly, how you can avoid simping. So let's go ahead and get
So
into
what
it.
did you learn about simping then?
Well, that it doesn't work. That it's if one wants to engage with women and get into a meaningful relationship, simping is not the way forward. Because you're basically you're placating, right? You're a pliable male that's trying to appeal to females, and you're not actually engaging with them on an emotional level. You're just giving them presents and undue compliments. And these women are essentially using you for your resource.
Okay, so I'm going to hit my three main points and I'm going to hit them in that same order. So, what is simping? Now, the easiest way for you guys to frame simping, because a lot of dudes are struggling with the definition of simp. I hear a lot of words being thrown around in modern day, void of the actual definition. And what's happening is you got people that don't have any personal experience with these things, and they have a very misrepresented definition of these things just based on what different types of media are telling them rather than their actual hands-on experience with it or an actual understanding of it, right? So let's peel it back a little bit. What's the simple thing I want you to keep in mind when avoiding simping, right? So the one thing I want you to keep in mind is that simping is a one-way road. It's a one-way avenue, right? So that's the first thing I want you to keep in mind. That will kind of help you not confuse simping with other behaviors. Now, what I mean by it's one way, okay, is that you're placating to a female, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be a female, because there's a lot of guys out here simping for content creators that are dudes. You're over here simping for dudes, right? You're caping for dudes. So that brings me back to my initial point, is that it's one way. So if you're constantly making excuses for someone, you're constantly trying to give to someone, you're constantly trying to compliment somebody and idolize somebody, worship something, and you're not actually getting anything tangible in return, you could very easily be in the category of simping. Now, in regards to women, I think it's really simple to understand what we mean when we say that a dude is simping for women, in the sense of it's one way. You're doing for this woman. You guys are gonna have to excuse this dog. You're going in one direction and you're not getting anything in return. Now, where I see the word simping being confused is when sometimes the guy and the girl are actually engaging in an actual two-way relationship. The guy's actually getting something out of the girl. It might be his girl, or they might be in the process of dating or courting or whatever you want to call it. And she actually is, doing certain things that he's getting gratification from, or he's benefiting from. In which case, it probably isn't simping, right? So are you simping for a woman when you're doing things that would fall under chivalry? Not if it's your actual woman, or you're in the process of developing a relationship with that person, and you're getting from that person whatever your expectation is at that time. So if you're asking a female out on dates and she's actually responding to you, she's texting you back, you're going on said dates, you're having a good time, you being a gentleman, you being polite, you paying for the date, you're not simping yet. You're simping at the moment where there isn't an understanding. You aren't on a date, but you're spending time with this woman. You're listening to her issues. You're being polite. You're giving her attention and validation, and she's either making it clear that you guys don't have the type of relationship that you're pining for, or she's not making it clear that you are, if that makes any sense. So if she's kind of in limbo with it, then you're probably wasting your time. You could easily fall into the category of simping. But let's go on a little bit more, and we'll talk a little bit more about what simping is, and then we'll finally get to the next part, which is how you could stop, why it doesn't work, and then we'll get on to the last part, which is how you can not be a simp at all.
For the people that don't know the term, how would you describe what a simp is?
Well, a simp, so the etymology of the term actually goes back, I think, to the 1920s, where simp was a shortened or condensed version of the term simpleton. But it was actually it was taken by rappers in the 1980s, 1990s, and used in a couple of rap songs I forget which one was it. I think maybe Tupac or Biggie had a song where they use the term simp. But in modern parlance, simp is a term that is used to describe a man that is, romantically hapless, right? He sort of gives presents and praise to women with the expectation of receiving some sort of sexual or emotional gratification, but receives none of it because he's pliable, right? He doesn't actually bring anything to the table emotionally or really in terms of being a worthwhile partner to have.
So how accurate his etymology on the word simping is, I'm not too sure. I think a much more updated definition of simping is just simply sympathizing. You're sympathizing with a woman that isn't your responsibility, and she isn't a prospect either. And what I mean by that is not so much that she isn't a prospect in your mind, that she's not a prospect in her mind. So if she hasn't given you any type of indication, any type of confirmation, or any type of signaling that she's interested in you in that way, therefore being an option, a possible option to you, and you being a possible option to her, then you're in the wrong place altogether. And there are many ways to prevent that, and we're going to get into those things. But one more thing that I will disagree with him on is that this person that's in this simp position doesn't have any value to this woman, or isn't a viable partner, or whatever he was trying to say with that. No, I think that's coming from someone who has been simping. I think that's coming from someone that is losing with it, that their assumption is that they're not good enough or that they're not viable. And a lot of times that's actually not what it is. Just because someone is simping, or just because someone is in the friend zone, or anything that you identify with simping, does not mean that it's not because they're not bringing enough value, or they're not good enough, or they don't have what it takes, or they're not compatible. A lot of times, guys, I want you guys to pay attention to what I'm about to say. A lot of times, it's as simple as there's no deal being made. The guy is giving, but he's not making clear what he wants, number one, and he's not getting any confirmation from the woman, number two. So he's doing, but he's not asking for anything in return. He's not making it clear, this for this, do you agree? Okay? I'll give you an example that has nothing to do with women. Let's say that, there's two guys, one has a car, the other one doesn't. If one is like, hey bro, I need a ride to go run an errand real quick, and the other one is like, and he's like, yo, just give me a ride, and I'll tell you what, I'll put gas in your tank or whatever. And they're like, all right, cool, let's do it. I'll run you over there. Now, a deal was made. One person says, bro, I need a ride. The other guy says, and then the guy says, listen, if you give me a ride, I'll fill your gas tank up. Okay, so now there's mutualism. Now both sides understand what the exchange is. Both sides understand what the expectation is. A deal is made. The expectation is there. It's presented. And now we'll see if the expectation is made. Now, if that guy gives him a ride and he doesn't fill that tank up, we got a problem. But he can address it because they agreed on it. So now he's entitled to his gas tank being filled, because it's like, bro, you told me to take you here and you were going to fill my gas tank up. So what's happening with simps is that conversation is not being presented to the female. The guy is saying, hey, I want to ride. Or he's not even saying I want to ride. He's kind of like hinting at it. But he's filling up that gas tank, and he's not ever getting this ride because he's not even asking for it up front. So I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but I think it's pretty easy to understand, right? So a lot of times what's happening is not necessarily the guy doesn't have value, not necessarily he's not compatible, but he didn't actually make a deal. He was just giving without requesting, and not giving that other person the opportunity to agree or decline that offer. All right, let's move on a little bit.
Yeah, and OnlyFans has basically monetized and weaponized this, right?
Yes, OnlyFans is the industrialization of simping. That's basically how I would define it. And it's a fantastic business model. Look, if we were to look at it purely from the lens of a business perspective, it is excellent at what it does because it capitalizes on something which is endemic today in the sexual marketplace, and that's emotional. That's this emotional connection that young men desire.
Yes, and the asymmetry, the fact that most men fear rejection, that they struggle with finding a mate, means that if they can pay to remove rejection, even if they know that the chance of genuine reciprocation is basically zero, most men are happy to pay that price.
Absolutely. They're more than happy to pay. And I think that probably speaks more about the nature and quality of men today than it does about anything else, that you would forego any sort of hardship for an easy win, or an easy win in their mind. It's like video games, right? I'm not knocking anyone that necessarily plays video games, But the notion that the trophy that you'd win in a video game is tantamount or similar to winning a physical trophy in a sports competition are the same is nonsensical. And the same thing applies here, in that you're foregoing rejection for what seems like an emotional connection with a woman that you don't really know.
I see this in the personal development world as well. So a lot of people, if you look at LinkedIn profiles, and that data analysis of LinkedIn profiles found that strategizing was one of the most used words in all strategizing or strategy, most used words in all of descriptions, and yet executing or executor wasn't even in the top 100. Reason for that being that it is significantly easier to strategize than execute, because by always strategizing and never executing, you prevent yourself from potential failure by inoculating yourself from success. If I just speak rhetorically, there's no chance that I'm going to fail, because in my world, in the world that I create of words, that never actually needs to come up against reality.
Okay, why doesn't simping work? Well, this is real simple. If you're giving someone something and you're expecting something in return, but you never was clear what that is, that other person is most likely not going to give you that thing, because either A, they don't even know what it is, or B, there's no incentive to, or C, you don't deserve it, because you're obviously not valuing it yourself. So why would they value what you're giving and reward you by giving you what you want, which obviously has more value than what they're giving you. Than what they're already giving you and what you're giving them. It obviously has more value if you're willing to go through this much for it. So you're kind of putting yourself out of business with that mentality, but also you're putting all your eggs in one basket. Either you actually are, or at least you're presenting yourself as you are. So, for example, there are guys that are simping on multiple women at the same time. But to each individual woman, she doesn't see you as having actual options or being options to other women. She sees you as someone that's beneath her, that has to invest all of his time and effort and energy into her simply because she's so much above him. In which case, she could not see herself settling for you if she has options herself, which I'm sure she does, or at least has the perception of. So in the simp's mind, he could be the best thing for her. He's the only guy that cares. He knows the most about her. He cares the most about her. He does the most for her. And in his mind, he's thinking that means I deserve you. But in her mind, any guy that's going to give that obviously doesn't deserve me. And I have to continue to look for and wait for the guy that does. So these are some of the reasons why it doesn't work, because you're showing her that you have a scarcity mindset. Even if, like I said, you're simping on multiple girls. There's guys that have money and they're simping on multiple girls. But to each individual girl, you're giving the impression of, I only have eyes for you. You're the best thing, and that's actually enabling her even more to feel overvalued, because she knows of a man, flesh and blood, an actual guy that's putting all this effort into her. In her mind equals, I am worth it. So if I am worth it, I have to find that level of effort in a higher quality guy. So it's a very dangerous game to play, guys, which is why, ignoring a girl or acting like you're really not that interested tends to work, because it tells her that you're actually probably more valuable than she is, or you're probably more valuable than the guys that are giving her that type of attention. So you want to set yourself apart from simps in general. So obviously you can't have simp behavior if you want to differentiate yourself from simps. So I hope you guys are understanding what I'm saying. But let's go a little bit further, and I'm going to kind of get to the root causes of how we got here, and more importantly, how we can get the hell up out of there and get some better results.
Mm-hmm. You're completely correct. I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, action wins the day, right? As that saying goes. And everyone has a plan, or everyone has a dream, but no one has a plan. And it's not only having a plan; it's executing the plan, right? We can talk as much as we want about things we want to do. A girl we like to talk to, and get into a relationship, a business we would like to start. But if you don't put one foot in front of the other and start marching forward and actually taking the necessary step towards achieving those things, you're never going to achieve it.
Why do you think there is a current trend amongst men towards this easier route out, whether that be in video games or in dating?
It's a good question, and it's a complex question, which means that the answer is probably multivariate, in the sense that there's no simple answer, one variable which explains why it is that men are the way they are. In this sense, it's probably has to do with socialization, how men are socialized today, maybe coddling as well, the sort of parenting strategies that are used to raise young boys and rear them. Um, it's a good question, but I would say those are probably the two things that I would probably point to. That we sort of bred out the warrior aspect, the sort of frontiersman notion in men, right? That notion of going out there and getting after it has been bred out of a lot of men, and we're sort of afraid or hesitant to engage in things which make us uncomfortable.
So we start getting into the definitions of what a man is. But first, let's get into why we even need to ask that question, because I think it ties in a lot of the points that he was missing. So, this guy seems to be, I don't want to say overeducated, but it seems like he spent a lot of time in academia. And what can happen with that is you start getting infiltrated with the same kind of thoughts and ideology that's corrupting our women. And that's that the causes of these things are societal, and it's it's a gender construct and all this other fucking blah 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 shit that just came out recently. Okay, so throughout the history of humanity, people didn't have to sit here and ask, well, what is being a man? What is manhood? What is femininity? Like, you didn't have to ask these questions because we all grew up with examples of it, right? So let's just keep it simple and go back to the basics. You wouldn't be asking these questions if they were strong fathers in the house. Period. We wouldn't be having these simpish behaviors because these fathers would have already raised their son not avoiding rejection, not avoiding difficulty, not avoiding fear, right? So when these masculine qualities come in, these masculine qualities are not taught verbally. We live in a day and age where everybody thinks that they're going to learn something verbally. Let me tell you something about boys. That's not even how boys learn. Okay, boys learn kinetically. They learn by actually doing. They learn by touching things, taking apart things, putting things back together. They learn by watching older men do this, right? And they gradually partaking it up to the capability that they have based on their age, right? And develop on that experience while being guided by established, experienced men. So where is the rite of passage? The rite of passage for men or boys has been taken out of our society. It doesn't even exist in Western society. So you have guys that are strategizing in video games and other things like that don't even have any real risk. You're not going to get hurt playing video games. You know what I mean? Whereas in real life, you can get hurt emotionally when you lose. You can get hurt mentally, and more importantly, you can get hurt physically. So we have that underlying threat of risk. There's the possibility of loss, and there's that challenge, right? But the older men are the ones that are pushing you and encouraging you to take these chances. And there is a level of faith there that's based on the fact that these older men have already done these things. So even though you might be terrified as a young boy, you have these older men kind of coaching you and guiding you and basically letting you know this is life, this is what it is, this is going to make you stronger. And this is where you can have boys executing a sense of fearlessness, a sense of bravery, right? It's not that they're not afraid, it's that they're willing to take that risk. And as we know, risk-taking is a masculine trait. So we're losing all these things in childhood. In childhood, we're losing these things. We're also losing young boys being taught how to plan and strategize and then execute. Are you building a rocket? Are you building a go-kart? Are you building a clubhouse? You know what I mean? So there's so many elements and values that are being lost in boys' childhood just simply from men not being there. Finding little pieces and parts and materials to build something, there's a sense of delayed gratification there, right? And there's also a sense of planning and strategy there, because you got these young boys that are trying to accomplish something. They decided to do something. It could be silly, it could be childish, but they decided to do something, and it requires them doing all these other little things, all these little steps to lead up to that. So right there, you have some type of camaraderie, you have some type of teamwork, right? There's an element of risk there. There's an element of the unknown. So there's exploration, there's discovery. There's all these very, very important elements that are in there in boyhood, right? That are developing them into young men and then eventually men in general, right? And men of accomplishment. And then they have all these experiences built up, which give them a certain level of confidence, so which is why they can take on the risk, they can take on the fear of rejection, they can take on the fear of failure, and more times, or sometimes, or a few times, or less times, or whatever amount of times, they're going to come out successful, right? And that's what it's all about. So we're missing that in young men's lives, and it's creating a huge void and a lack of understanding in manhood in general and masculinity in general, and has us asking these silly ass questions that we should have had the answer to at 14. Okay?
Beyond suffering lies greatness. But in order to achieve greatness, you first have to suffer. And people are just terrified of discomfort and suffering, which, they're scary things, yes, but if you want to be where you want to be, you're going to have to suffer, right? You're going to have to pay the price.
Not only is this happening on an individual level, but you've also got a cultural level of this with regards to the views around masculinity, men overall, what the definition of a man is.
Yes. That's a curious thing, actually. I want to ask you about that specifically, how you would define what a man is, or what it means to be a man.
A lot of guys are focusing way too much on females, what females think, and what females want, and what females are attracted to, when simply they're attracted to masculinity, masculine traits. So you kind of got to think less about the chicks and focus more on understanding masculinity for yourself and pursuing it, seeking it, putting yourself through the activities, through the challenges that are going to develop this. Even if you're a late bloomer, that means you have little to no time to waste. You need to get on this type of shit immediately, and you need to go ahead and put challenges in front of yourself so that you can start banging these things out and developing your own sense of what masculinity is, and your own sense of progress in that department that's going to go ahead and build your confidence. So anybody telling you just go out there and be confident, I'm sorry, man, they're an idiot. They're giving you terrible advice. You don't just go out and be confident, okay? You have to develop confidence through challenging yourself and knocking down all these tasks to get to a place where you feel comfortable taking on even bigger challenges and taking even more risk as an individual. And I guarantee you, if you keep yourself busy with that, you're not going to have time for girls or video games. You're not going to have time for OnlyFans. You're going to be too busy working on your personal man shit. Just saying.
I mean, the definitions around masculinity and what it means to be a man, you're trying to encapsulate a felt sense and an embodied sense lexically, which is always going to be a mess, right? Because the words are always going to be slightly imprecise. And because we're looking for generalizations here, people are always going to be able to point out aberrations of the generalization. A control of oneself and one's own emotions, leadership from the front, taking responsibility. These things, whether you're a man or a woman, a masculine man or a masculine woman, I think that anybody that embodies those traits, you would say, yeah, that's a fairly masculine way to be.
Masculinity is a combination of four things. So you have honor, you have strength, you have courage, and you have mastery. And I like those, but in my mind, I have a tripartite model as well. So I would say that it's based around courage, which I think he's right. So being afraid of doing something, but then doing it anyway. The second, which relates to something you said, is personal responsibility verging on extreme ownership. And extreme ownership is a term that is used by Jocko Willink. So taking control not only of the things within your world and your realm, but branching out and taking care of issues that are not necessarily your problem, but things that you must take care of. And the final thing, I believe, is conquest. So having a goal, having an aim, wanting to put a dent in the universe. And then the through line between all of these three concepts is emotional control. So for me, the hallmark of masculinity is emotional control. It doesn't matter how you feel when you get up in the morning. There's a job to be done, and you have to do it.
Absolutely. There's always something that needs to be done, right? That's something I noticed about men when I was growing up, is the real men, the men that were respected, they didn't have any idle time, man. There was always something that needed to be worked on. There's always something that needed to be improved. And in your life, you should always have, obviously, a purpose. You should have your purpose, be on your purpose daily. When you wake up in the morning, you should already in your head be like, all right, all the things I thought about last night before I went to bed, boom, now I'm rested, I'm up, it's time for me to start executing those things. And there should always be something consistent in your life that terrifies you. There should always be something that's scary, something that is difficult that you're working on. You should always be going towards that. So discomfort. If you expect to change any aspect of your life and make anything better, you're going to have to go to some form of discomfort. There's going to be something uncomfortable that you're going to have to do. There's also going to be something, like I said, that's terrifying, that's scary, because you could fail, you could lose. You understand what I'm saying? And there should be something that's hard and challenging. So you should constantly be going towards those things. And that's what's going to give you the attitude of, I could do this. You know what I mean? I could do this, right? So first comes the strategy and the plan, then comes executing it, and there should always be a time frame on what you set out to do. Always be a time frame. And the reason why is because in that time frame, it eliminates procrastination. You won't have space for procrastination if you keep putting a time frame on everything that you need to accomplish. You put a pressure on yourself, right? So if a pressure isn't being put on you by, say, a father, or a pressure isn't being put on you by a boss, or a pressure isn't being put on you by a woman, doesn't matter. You should be putting a pressure on yourself. And this is how we get to being good, and then put some more pressure on that bitch, and that's how you get to being great.
Yeah, so disagreeableness is a fascinating characteristic. So of the big five personality traits, if one wanted to be a success in a specific field or reach the top of their dominance hierarchy, they would have to be low in agreeableness and high in disagreeableness, because it's a matter of getting one's way and not being a pushover, being a monster in Jordan Peterson's phraseology.
So yeah, man, I definitely agree that Jordan Peterson definitely had gave us a gem with that when he categorized being disagreeable as a somewhat more masculine of a trait, whereas being agreeable is somewhere more of a feminine trait. And I think it sums up a lot of what we're experiencing today in the gender dynamics, is that guys are becoming a lot more feminine. And really, when you say that, it's not really specific. It's like, what's feminine about the guys today? I think looking at the guys today as being too agreeable is a great way to explain what we mean by they're becoming more feminine, and the women are becoming more masculine. And an easy way to understand that is the women are becoming more disagreeable. And that's an issue. That's an issue in a relationship. That's an issue in our society. So should guys be more disagreeable? Absolutely. I'm an extremely disagreeable person, in the sense of I don't like being told no, and not in the way of like, I'm trying to like force something or take something, but in the way of I'm willing to adjust my approach and my strategy to get what I want, and I'm willing to be persistent until I can figure out how to appeal to or incentivize the other party involved that I need to basically agree. So by me being disagreeable and not accepting no, and constantly trying to figure out how do I need to go about this, what ends up happening is that other person or thing becomes agreeable before I do, right? So it's kind of like a game of chicken. And I think a lot of guys just don't possess that level of persistence or disagreeableness. And I see it all the time with when guys hit on girls. It's like they give up right away. If they even have the courage or the heart to go over there, the moment that it's not going easy, then they're like, oh, okay, well, sorry to bother you, or okay. Whereas women want to feel like you're working for it. They want to feel like you're actually going hard, and they also want to feel like you're brave and resilient, and you know how to handle rejection. Because a lot of times, women's initial rejection, or what might seem like rejection, is not actually that. It's a form of shit testing, because they're not good at interacting with guys that much either anymore, because it just doesn't happen naturally anymore, or in person as much. A lot of women will tell you guys don't even approach anymore. So most women are used to getting a very passive text, I don't want to say text message or DM, or being inboxed or whatever. And if you think about it, that's not a very disagreeable way to approach someone, because she could just ignore that message. You know what I mean? But if you're talking to her in person, first of all, there's a level of risk there. There's no level of risk in being ignored in the DM. You could just tell yourself that she didn't see the message, even though the shit says read. You know what I mean? That's you're not taking a chance there. You're not taking a risk. You're not showing any masculine traits or qualities by just DMing a girl by concept. What you say in the DM now could be very masculine, but just you DMing her isn't necessarily a masculine act. That's actually something women would tend to do. It's just send you a message that's not really saying much of anything. It's just starting a conversation, and they're kind of like waiting for you now to be the assertive one. Like if a girl likes a guy on social media, she might just message him an emoji or something, and then it's like she hasn't said shit, right? But she's just basically putting some bait out there for the guy to be the one to take the bait and now lead the conversation and take it somewhere. So it's almost like she tricked him into being the pursuer, but he should be the pursuer, right? So anyway, in person, when you're talking to a woman trying to get to know someone, you should be letting her know that you're attracted to her right off rip, and you should also be giving off the aura of I see you, I like you, I want you. Right? It's assertive, and it's a quality that she lacks, and women are going to be attracted to qualities they lack. So guys, work on your masculinity and attract women that are more feminine and more agreeable, and they work like yin and yang, right? But also just in the business place, interacting with your boys, being disagreeable is very important, because you're not only establishing yourself, but you're continuously defining yourself. And if you're too agreeable, then you don't know what's you and what's these outside influences. At work, if you're willing to just accept the way that they treat you, eventually they're going to convince you that you deserve less than you actually do. So by being disagreeable, you kind of maintain your own opinion on things and your own desires, and you understand that you have to convince other people to be agreeable with how you see yourself as well as how you see the world, if you want shit to go your way.
Yeah, and I suppose that a lack of disagreeability is precisely what you're seeing with simps.
Yes, yes. So to that point of disagreeability, when we talk about economics, one study demonstrated that if someone was, a man in particular, was one standard deviation below the level of agreeableness, they would they would earn 18% more than a man who was one standard deviation above the baseline agreeableness, which means that disagreeable people make more money than agreeable people.
And also potentially get laid more, or are more
Yes.
attractive to the opposite sex. However, I would say, and we can get into this, the converse would be untrue for women. That if you have a woman who is increasingly disagreeable, that she is probably going to be less attractive as a mate.
Yep, absolutely. So let's wrap this shit up. So disagreeable women, avoid them. Disagreeable men, learn to work with them. Learn to come to some type of agreement that benefits both parties. And if you can, shit, make it benefit you as much as possible, if more than the other person. That's cool too. But yeah, so guys, we're gonna work on, masculine traits. We're gonna work on understanding masculinity from the inside out. We're gonna work on seeking older, more experienced, wiser men to learn from and to feed off of. That's something you definitely need to put into your strategy, into your approach, is finding an older dude, man. If you're not fortunate enough to have someone in your family that fits the bill, find that person. But I encourage guys to not seek these mentors or these role models online, right? That might sound like it's a conflict of interest for somebody like me, because I'm supposed to be a content creator or some type of coach or something like that. But I'm just going to be honest with you guys, and I got to keep shit authentic. There's nothing wrong with learning online. I learned a ton of shit online. I love the app of YouTube itself, because you can find a tutorial on almost anything. But I definitely recommend that you have someone in your life that you can take a personal interest in, or have a comfort in knowing that they take a personal interest in you. They're invested in you as a young male, and they want to see you do better. They want to see you do better than them. They want you, what I'm saying? That's what you need to look for. You need to look for older men that you admire, that you respect, that actually can take an interest in you to the point where they actually want you to do better than them. They want you to make less mistakes than they made and achieve, greater things. All right, that's what we need. Fathers, coaches, mentors, uncles, role models. That's what we need. We need an emphasis on positive masculinity. And those traits are dying, guys. You got to look at it that way. It's like they're antique now. You know what I mean? They're classics. They're going out of style. So we need to put that much more effort into finding those dinosaurs, finding those guys that still exist, that still have these traditional traits, so that we can get them, embody them, and we can pass them on to guys younger than us. That's always how these ideas have been transmitted. That's always been the case. So all this modern media bullshit, acting like they're redefining all these terms and all these roles and constructs. Whatever, man. Let's get back to the basics, right? Keep it simple. And I'm gonna put out something else about simping pretty soon, but just how there's an economy, based on it now. There's a simp economy, and we're headed towards a simpopolis. You know what I mean? It's gonna be terrible, guys. So, like I said, the attitude needs to be save yourself. Put as much time, energy, and focus into developing yourself, developing your skills, developing your mindset, developing your confidence, being more accountable, being more resourceful, you know what I mean? Creating more value and adding more value. That's what I want you guys to focus on. Women are just a byproduct of that. I see so many young guys, and the first fucking thing they ask me is always in regards to some female. It's like, you guys got to focus on yourselves, man. Okay? Focus on yourselves. This is why you're not attractive or compatible to women, because you haven't built value within yourself first. And then you're more worried about what a woman is going to see valuable, not realizing that women aren't really that good a judge of shit. They're not really that good a judge of character. They're not really a good judge of honor, integrity. I mean, think about it. If they were, why would they be choosing the wrong guys? Why would they be choosing the wrong guys? So you have to become somebody that you respect and you admire, right? And you can do that best by analyzing, studying, and understanding men who you already do. All right, so look into that. I'm gonna get out of here, guys.
Yes, because disagreeableness, I think, is more of a masculine characteristic, at least based on the psychological evidence, the cognitive psychology would indicate that to be the case. And I think on average is a term we're probably going to be using.
Everything's on average.
Everything is on average. Good God. But on average, men are more disagreeable, and they're typically looking for a woman that is feminine. And if a woman, I would say, possesses a quality of disagreeableness, it probably makes her more masculine than it does feminine.